Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the author of the Penny Panda children's book series, of which there are 2 books. Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility and Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas, the latter of which was released earlier this week. Her name is Nicole Oke, and my interview with Nicole, which was recorded before Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas was released, will follow the teleportation sound. Nicole Oke, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. My name is Nicole Oke, and I am a children's book author. I am also a mother of 2 beautiful girls, aged 8 and 3, who inspire a lot of what I write about. And I also work in Boise, Idaho at the National Interagency Fire Center, where I work as a training specialist and help in wildland fire.
You're the author of the Penny Panda children's book series. One book is out, and then there's another book that's coming out September 24th, and I'll start with the first book in the series. Without spoiling too much of it, what is Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility about?
Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility is the first book in the Penny Panda series, and it's about a little girl named Izzy who gets a very special stuffed panda for Christmas, and it's Penny Panda. And she comes to life anytime Izzy has big emotions and feelings and needs someone to talk to. So in the beginning, Izzy is a little bit disappointed. She's kind of like, why did Santa bring me a stuffed animal? And when her parents explain that it's a penny for her thoughts, she's kind of like, okay. But as the day goes on, she kind of starts to notice that her baby sister, Maddie, gets more Christmas presents than her. And in her mind, Izzy starts to believe that maybe that means her parents love Maddie more than her. So Izzy goes to her room with Penny, and she's just kind of like, so what do I do? Just start talking? And that's when Penny comes to life. And she's like, yes, I am here for you to help you. And so they talk about what's going on, about what Izzy is feeling. And then Penny uses what we call the possibility game to help Izzy see different possible reasons why her little sister may have gotten more presents than her. And it's a game that I really like having in the book because it's a practical tool that parents can actually use at home with their own kids, the possibility game. And they can kind of help them to open up their mind to these different possibilities and kind of start questioning like those automatic meanings that we give to things that happen in life. So I won't spoil the ending on what the conclusion is or what the really fun possibility they come up with is, but that's kind of the premise of that first book.
The second book in the Penny Panda series will be Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas, and as I mentioned a little bit ago, that's slated to be released on September 24th. Without spoiling too much of that book, what will it be about?
So that book is about Izzy, and she's about to go into the school talent show. And she is so excited. She's been practicing her dance for weeks. She can't wait to perform. But when she looks out at the audience to find her family, she starts to get really nervous. And so she doesn't quite understand how she can feel both excited and nervous at the same time. So she goes and gets her reliable friend, Penny Panda, and they start talking about how it's normal to have multiple emotions at one time. And Penny kind of talks her through why our emotions are here, how they serve us, and how they help us, and that sometimes they can be really sneaky. And so when Penny talks about that, Izzy kind of lets out this kind of like, shout like, oh my gosh, like ninjas. And so Izzy starts to imagine all of her emotions as this colorful cast of emotion ninjas. And from there, it's just a really cute story about Izzy kind of figuring out why each emotion is there, what they're there for, and then it ends with her kind of taking on and being the boss of her own emotional journey and telling her emotions like which ones can stay and which ones can go, and then she goes forward with her show. There's a very special surprise emotion at the end.
Richard Hoyt, did I pronounce his last name correct? I know it's spelled Hoit.
Yes, Richard Hoyt. Yep.
Well, he illustrated both books in the Penny Panda series. And what was it like to work with Richard on your books?
Richard is amazing. He's definitely a pro. He's based in New Zealand, which is kind of fun because it's, I don't know, just a fun connection to that country and to work with him. And he's so creative and professional. In the first book, I was so new to writing children's book, and he helped me like really kind of expand on the story through the illustrations. He gave me feedback and provided me with some really fun ideas. And I couldn't wait to go back and start working on Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas with him. And the process of kind of coming up with what the ninjas looked like, it was just a hoot. I'm hoping that he'll be available for all the Penny Panda books that come in the future.
What was the inspiration for the Penny Panda series?
So I started writing the Penny Panda series back in about 2021, and I was inspired by my own emotional growth. So I was going through a lot of big emotions and feelings at the time. It was around the time of the pandemic. A lot of us, I think, were having really big emotions. And so I was doing a lot of self-development and trying to figure like, how can I cope with these emotions? How can I manage them and regulate them and really kind of prevent any unnecessary suffering through the way that I think? And as I was doing this, I found some really cool tools that I could use. And it was helping me so much that I would turn around and I would look at my little girls and I would think to myself, well, what about them? Like, how can I take these tools and teach that to my children so that they can have these tools at a young age? Because some of these skills that I was learning on this emotional intelligence journey was things that if I'd had in like middle school and high school, life would have been so much easier and so much better. So I went to Amazon and I kind of started searching for children's books that I could read to my kids to start that process. And I found a lot of books that talked about how emotions are good, how we should embrace our emotion, but they all kind of felt like they stopped there. There were some books about, like breathing and mindfulness and some good helpful mechanisms that kids could use, but there was no real like definition of why our emotions are there and how they serve us and how we can kind of take control and utilize this whole emotional intelligence skill set to better manage our emotions. So when I couldn't find what I was looking for, I decided to write one myself. So that's how Penny Panda came about. It was my desire to have something a little more concrete, a little more useful and practical to be able to use with my kids. And I thought, if it could really serve my kids, then I bet there's a lot of parents out there that wish they had tools like this too. So that's when I decided to go ahead and publish the book.
What benefits do children and parents get when the children read the Penny Panda series? I apologize if I asked a question that you kind of answered and when you answered the previous one.
No worries. So my goal with each Penny Panda book is to have a practical tool or way of discussing emotions that parents can use with their kids. So hopefully they're reading the book together, engaging in the story, and then they can take those lessons, both the kids and the parents, and start using them in daily life. So for example, with Penny Panda and the Gift of Possibility, they use the possibility game. So I play that game with my kids all the time. An example would be like when my oldest daughter comes home, there was a day where she was a little upset. So I asked her what was happening. And she said, well, my friend didn't want to play with me at recess today. I don't think they like me anymore. And I said, well, that's one possibility, right? I could see why you would think that. And I bet a lot of kids would think that way if that happened to them. But what could the other possibilities be? And so we would play the possibility game and she would come up with other possible answers like, well, it's possible they didn't want to play the game I was playing, so they didn't play with me at recess today. It's possible that maybe they wanted to read a book or do something different. It's possible that they just needed a little break from me today, but we're still going to be friends. And when we can kind of like use those tools, it opens up their minds to think about their emotions and to think about the meanings that they're giving to events and to really kind of start to get curious about it all. And that's where you can kind of prevent some of that unnecessary suffering into the future. And so the possibility game is one of my favorite ones. And then with the Penny Panda and the Emotion Ninjas, the goal there is to start to encourage kids to really think about their emotions as part of who they are, but not who they are, to kind of view them as these things that reside within them, that help guide them and serve them, but that aren't in control of them. The goal is to really get kids to understand that we control our emotions and that we can learn to use them to best serve us. And so with that book, the goal is to be able to have parents and kids be able to have a common language to talk about emotions. And then when kids get overly upset, we can be like, okay, which emotion ninja is here with us now? And they can start to label and name their feelings. And then it kind of creates this safe space to talk about it, because it's like, okay, your angry ninja is here now. And so you're talking about the ninja, not necessarily the kid, even though it's the feelings that they're feeling. So then they feel a little bit safer to have the conversation about, angry ninja's here and this is why. And then it just opens up that door to have the conversations. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it does. You self-published the Penny Panda series. What is it like to self-publish children's books, and what did you learn by doing so?
I have learned so much by doing self-publishing. There was so much I didn't know that I didn't know when I started this journey. I had no background in writing, no background in publication. And so when I created this book and decided to go forward, I tried to do a lot of research, but I didn't even know what questions to ask. And so really, the only reason I think I was successful is because I surrounded myself with a really good team of people. I had an editor that really helped me through the process. I had a book formatter that helped me with all the technical stuff. I had Richard as my illustrator, who was absolutely amazing. And they really helped me to get that first book out. And then between the release of the first book and then writing the second book, I've joined a couple coaching programs. I've joined a couple writing groups here in my local area. And just by working with all these different writers, I have learned so much more. And I still love my first book, but I think my second book is even better. I think it's more succinct. I think it's going to be, just really a favorite among kids. And I owe so much to all those people that have helped me and helped me learn, what's needed in the industry, what's best for kids, what people like. It's definitely a journey. It's one that I recommend to folks, but it's one that I always kind of recommend with like a disclaimer. It's not easy and it's very humbling, but well worth it.
You had a much better experience than me when I self-published my first book, because I was not in the right mental state when I self-published my first book. And I basically, what I did is I put myself in a corner of my bedroom, wrote the book on a laptop, and then self-published it. And that's not the way to go with self-publishing at all.
No, I agree. And it's because and I'll be honest, when I started writing, that's kind of what I thought I would be doing. And it was through the research and kind of reaching out to folks that I heard stories kind of like yours, that they said, you need to find that editor. You need to have that book formatter. And I've even learned I've switched editors from editor one, who was fantastic, to my new editor who specializes in children's books. And even knowing like things like that you should have an editor that specializes in your genre has been so helpful. But self-publishing, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it's going to be easy and all you have to do is write a book and post it on the web. And it's unfortunately not that easy.
And that leads into my next question. What is the best advice you could offer to any author who wants to self-publish their books?
My number one tip would be to get your team together and get them together early and make sure that you've got a good group of people. And along with that, my tip would be to know that it's going to cost money up front. we all look at self-publishing as kind of like this route that's separate from traditional publishing that's supposed to be a little bit quicker and easier, but to really make it successful, it still has to look like a traditionally published book. And so that's kind of where those, especially in children's books, a lot of people want to use cheap illustrators or, artificial intelligence for their illustrations because it's a lot less money. But people have an expectation from traditional publishing of what a children's book should look like and what level those illustrations should be at. So you have to be prepared to kind of spend some money, hire a good editor, hire a good formatter, hire your illustrator if you're doing a children's book, and just kind of gather that team. And then my other piece of advice that I always give to new folks is start building your audience right away, because I didn't do that. Marketing was not my strong suit on my first book. I probably had like 60 people that were mainly friends and family that followed me on any social media platform when I published my first book. And it was still fairly successful, but I had no idea the kind of time and effort and energy you had to put into building your audience, to finding those people that really like your writing and want to follow you and will continue to buy your books. So I always tell people, start that now, even while you're writing the book. Start building your audience, start making those connections.
You are very passionate about social emotional learning for children. Why are you passionate about social emotional learning for children, and why do you believe that social emotional learning is important for children?
To me, social emotional learning is important because it's two different aspects that are both equally important. You've got your emotional intelligence, which is really about being self-aware, understanding your emotions, where they come from, how to manage them, how to move through them. And then you've got the social side of it, which is understanding other people's emotions, being able to see the perspectives of other people, feeling empathy, being able to show compassion. And the reason I think that those are so important is because, we need a little more kindness in the world, in my opinion. And I think if we can all understand what we're feeling and why we're feeling it, and then be able to empathize and understand how other people are feeling and kind of see things from their point of view, it allows us to build connections. It allows us to have these relationships where we can really understand each other and treat each other with respect and have conversations that aren't rude, that aren't aggressive. And I think that the earlier in life we can start to teach that to our kids, the better off the world is going to be, and the better off they'll be, because they don't have to go through some of those emotional roller coasters of having these big emotions but not understanding why or how or what to do with them. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. I think it just will create human beings who are kind and compassionate, but also still have these, solid boundaries. It creates kind of a resiliency in kids when they have an emotional intelligence where they can really reflect back and understand why things happened and how the emotions played into it, and be able to also understand how others are feeling and their emotions. So that's why I'm passionate about it. And I think there's a lot of folks in the world that are kind of getting into the social emotional learning. And I know it's kind of a word out there right now that some people love and some people don't love. And to me, it's not about like the next cool thing or the next terminology. It's really about giving kids and adults the skills that they need to just live a better, happier life.
What can parents do to help their children build their social emotional intelligence?
I think the biggest thing that parents can do to start building their children's social emotional intelligence is really to just start talking about emotions and just make it so it's not taboo. I think, a couple generations ago, nobody really talked about what they were feeling or what emotions were going on. And now, if we can just encourage kids to be able to start to name what's happening and to understand it, then they can kind of start that emotional intelligence journey and really start to understand and manage their emotions. And I think one of the easiest ways we can do that as parents is through books like the Penny Panda series, or through movies like the one that recently came out was Inside Out 2. These books and these movies provide parents with a way to really kind of talk about emotions with their kids in a safe space, because their kids aren't actually feeling them in the moment. So it opens up the dialogue, the conversation, to be able to talk about how would you feel in this situation, or how do you think that character is feeling right now? And that's what social emotional learning is. It's just getting curious about emotions and learning about them. And the more that you can make your home a safe space to talk about emotions, the better.
My final question is not about your work as an author, but it's about your work for the National Interagency Fire Center here in the United States, which is headquartered in Boise, Idaho, and I believe is correct me if I'm wrong, is it like some kind of a wildland firefighting coordinating agency?
Yes. So the National Interagency Fire Center is the national center, for wildland firefighting. And so you've got all the federal agencies that have wildland firefighter programs have a seat at the table at the National Interagency Fire Center. So we've got Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Fish and Wildlife Service, and they all come together and they help to manage, coordinate, train, all sorts of things, all of our wildland firefighters. And so it's kind of just this centralized location where all the senior leadership for these agencies in wildland fire, where they reside, so that they can work together. Because the biggest thing about wildland fire is that it is interagency, which means all of these different federal agencies work together. And we also work with our cooperators and our state partners as well. And so it really takes a lot of communication, a lot of coordination to make it a successful program. And so that's where I work, and I love working in wildland fire, and it's an amazing job.
Nicole, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an awesome guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being on.
It was amazing to interview Nicole, and I wish her well with the second book in her series. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.